Well, the first thing to know is that there are probably hundreds of different brand name therapies. Some therapists are more effective than others. And it's important to bear in mind that it's not the therapy, because there is very little difference in the outcomes across therapies. You need to treat looking for a therapist like buying a pair of shoes. It's how often do you walk into a shoe shop and just take a pair of shoes off the shelf and say, I'll have these?
Now then, welcome to Reconnect, the podcast for people who want to heal and grow from life's tough times. I'm Joe Tudor, the founder of the Reconnect Club and a mental health keynote speaker. Today I'm chatting with Barry McInnes, a therapist with over 40 years of experience, who spent a large part of his career both managing and evaluating therapy services right across the UK. We'll be talking about the different types of therapy, where you can access support, and how to find a therapist that's right for you. Right, here's Barry.
So when I started my therapy journey, I was really confused because it seemed like there were quite a few different types of therapy.
Okay.
What are the most common types of therapy people can get access to?
Well, the first thing to know is that there are probably hundreds of different brand name therapies. More than 500.
Wow, that's a lot.
Easily. More than 500 brand name therapies. But they split across four main groups, which are psychodynamic, cognitive and behavioral, humanistic, stroke experiential, and systemic. So those are the four main types under which each one of those 450, 500 individual brand name therapies will fall into one of those broad categories. Shall I just very briefly kind of outline?
Yeah, that'd be really useful, I think, because there'd be people sat at home wondering what those four are.
Absolutely. They mean absolutely nothing to most people. Psychodynamic approaches really focus on the impact of early experiences in people's lives on their present functioning and how their functioning is affected. So that's the kind of target of therapy, looking at early experiences and how they affect people in the here and now, and trying to focus on that kind of area, making the connection, helping people to make better choices in the here and now.
I suppose on that, you hear a lot of people talking about childhood and experiences in childhood.
Yep.
I mean, we had an amazing podcast with Dr. Gillian Bowden, the clinical psychologist, and she touched on the impact of difficult childhood experiences. So perhaps if you're acknowledging that you've had a difficult childhood, then a psychodynamic approach might be one that you consider.
It would certainly be worth considering, but there are equally arguments why you might want to consider something entirely different. Okay. Because underpinning each of the four main groupings is a particular focus and a particular philosophy, a way of thinking about how we construe people's problems and how we can best help them to overcome them. So it's important to think about the philosophy and the aims behind each one of the therapies. Most people have had adverse events in childhood, but it doesn't necessarily mean to say that the psychodynamic approach is necessarily the best approach for that.
That's good to know.
Yep.
And the second one you mentioned was
cognitive and behavioral. So let's forget the early experiences. They happen, very regrettable, but what we need to be doing is looking at the way that people's cognition, people's thinking style actually affects the way that they behave and the way that they feel. If we can identify what CBT therapists call cognitive distortions, which is not a phrase that I like, but cognitive distortions which lead to people being miserable.
So would that be, just to cut you off there, a cognitive distortion, what does that mean? Is that thinking about something the wrong way or something?
The thinking about something in an unhelpful way. So, for example, catastrophizing on the basis of an event You say, this always happens to me, or I know what's going to happen and it will be awful before the event has actually happened.
Yeah.
So it's like, fortune telling, prediction is a form of cognitive distortion. So CBT therapists will, amongst other things, be helping people to look at the way that they construct their thinking to something more realistic and helpful and appropriate to reality, because a lot of those unhelpful ways of thinking aren't actually reality based. They're based on a kind of construct of this always happens to me, and it always will.
So I've experienced CBT and mixed experience. I think the parts of it that really were applicable, I used the experience of things I'm scared of. Like, I'm scared of heights, but I love rock climbing.
Yep.
So their graded exposure approach, and telling myself that these aren't helpful thoughts. So this is very much my take, but I can really see the applications if someone's feeling really anxious about something, or maybe has some sort of phobia. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but I can see the applications there. But where it didn't necessarily work for me was, I find that when I start to experience feelings of depression, and I have to work backwards. It's not always a conscious thought. It's not like I've thought myself into feeling depressed. Sometimes I find having a bit of a detective and casting a spotlight on what might it be, and that's why I go to therapy to speak with my therapist, which we'll elaborate on later.
Yeah.
Is that a fair argument, that it almost seems like CBT is formed on that you can change your thoughts and that everything starts with a thought? But my experience is it doesn't always go that way.
It is an argument that CBT therapists advance, but the thought isn't always immediately available to you, even if the thought is the thing that triggers off the subsequent sequence of events which lead you to feeling anxious or depressed. So I think I was talking about the philosophy behind the different therapies. CBT approaches are based on the idea that this is the way to do this type of therapy. And for some people, it really, really works amazingly well. For some people, it grates. And for some people, works well sometimes, and at other times it just grates because it feels like it's focusing in the wrong area.
And I talk openly about going to therapy, but people will often push the type of therapy they've experienced that they like.
Yeah.
And I've found that often with CBT, people that like it will really push it on you. I definitely took some value from it, but it didn't necessarily work for me. And I ended up going, as I always do, going on these deep philosophical debates with my CBT therapist, because he was telling me about changing my thoughts. And I said, well, where do thoughts come from? And that's a really slippery slope, because before you know it, you're debating the whole consciousness, and I don't think anyone's got an answer there. So what we've got? Psychodynamic, that's the first type. CBT, second type. What were the next ones?
Humanistic stroke experiential. So the approach there is less on problems, symptoms that need addressing or alleviating or curing, and more on people's potential, their potential for their potential for living satisfying lives, living rewarding lives, developing their human potential. So humanistic approaches would tend to focus less on problems and more on the here and now, how people are feeling, and helping them to develop their own unique potential.
And what was the final type?
The final type, systemic approaches. So that would recognize that we are not isolated in our worlds. We are part of systems, the earliest of which is generally some form of family system for us, and that will profoundly affect our experience of the world and the people that we've become. So rather than just addressing our problems or symptoms or experiences as being independent of the systems, it's looking at how those systems have affected us, acknowledging the fact that they have caused problems and may still cause problems, but helping us to have, if needed, a different way of interacting with those systems so that we become less affected by them and more able to affect the systems.
Okay, cool. So people listening to this, the 4 different types: psychodynamic,
Yep.
cognitive behavioural, which is otherwise known as CBT, humanistic, and systemic, the 4.
Yep.
Yeah, there might be a load of other names, but they're the 4 sort of key categories. So hopefully people listening will have a bit of a clue. Oh, that sounds interesting, sounds relevant to me. Are they exclusive, or do therapists mix and match?
It varies. It varies.
Yeah.
Some therapists are purist. They have their model and they like to stick to it. Other therapists, including myself, do. It's less about liking to mix and match. It's more about when working with an individual client, you begin to see opportunities for a particular approach or a particular technique having an application with a particular client or a particular client's problem or issue. So those types of therapists are often called integrative. They integrate particular approaches, but in a thoughtful and systematic way. So it's not just plucking things out of the air. There is a process that integrative therapists go through in deciding, or hopefully always in collaboration with the client, that this particular approach is going to be helpful or may be helpful for this particular client with this particular issue.
That's really good to know. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'd like a few different approaches as an integrative therapist or psychotherapist, release me the question: does it make a difference to us as a client, if that's the right word to use, if we see a counsellor or a psychotherapist? Is there a difference, or does it have any impact on us?
No, it shouldn't do. It shouldn't do. I call myself a therapist. There is a long-standing turf war between counselling and psychotherapy, and I choose not to go there.
I think what you've just explained there hopefully will help a lot of people listening to this, because it breaks through they might be looking at it thinking, I don't know what one. Do I see a counsellor? Do I see a therapist? What type of therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope it does help to clarify. I mean, I think the most important question is not, do I need a counsellor or a therapist? Do I need counselling or psychotherapy? The most important question is, do I have confidence that the person I'm seeing now is going to be able to help me with the problems that I came with?
That's really good to know. And kind of leads to my next question. And what I'm interested to know, so you've got these different types of therapy, and you've worked in evaluation.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's a difficult question to answer because we're not comparing apples with apples, but how well did they work?
Okay, it's an incredibly easy question
is it?
to answer. Yes. They all work, and they all work more or less equally well. Studies, large-scale studies called meta-analysis, that's studies which draw in, many other studies of the effectiveness of therapy, show something called an effect size. That's the size of the impact on clients overall. And the most authoritative meta-analyses would tend to suggest that the overall effect size of therapy overall is 0.08 in something called, I'll explain this, Cohen's D. It's a way of explaining effect size. What that means is that with an effect size of 0.8, which is a large effect size, it means the average client after therapy would be better off psychologically than 79% of untreated clients.
These people have looked at, analysed loads of studies, loads of participants,
Yep.
and what they found basically is that you're 79% better off.
Well, Not quite, not quite.
Okay.
So you give people an instrument, some kind of outcome measure which assesses their level of distress at the beginning,
Yeah.
and they have another one at the end. And sometimes there's a measure all the way
Yeah.
through therapy, so you can track their
I've
progress. And it
done many of
shows,
those forms.
yeah, yes, you're
Many.
familiar with them. So you will have an idea about what those involve and the questions that they ask. But broadly speaking, if you compare pre and post across many studies involving hundreds, even thousands of therapists, tens of thousands of clients, the average effect size 0.8, which means that that average client, if there is such a thing as an average client, of course, is better off than 79% of people who do not go into therapy, do not receive treatment.
So that's pretty overwhelming. That the chances are that if you
It is.
see a therapist, then it is gonna help.
It really should help. But within that mean, there is a range,
Yeah.
obviously. Some therapists are more effective than others. And it's important to bear in mind that it's not the therapy, because there is very little difference in the outcomes across therapies. They are all, broadly speaking, equivalent in their outcomes.
So me, for example, saying that I didn't get the CBT didn't really work for me. It's not that CBT from an outcome basis is a lesser therapy. It's just that it didn't work for me.
Correct. Correct.
So it's not like there's an evidence base that would suggest that this is the goal, this is the type we should be doing.
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely
Yeah.
correct. Yeah. It may just be that, something like a psychodynamic approach where you are spending time, just exploring some of the experiences that you've had early on in life, reflecting on how those might have shaped the person that you are now is more what you're looking for at this particular point. It might be your preferred approach, whereas the CBT approach just feels like it's a bit sort of, ABC.
If the outcomes are pretty much, well, if the outcomes are the same depending on the therapy type,
Yeah.
what else impacts the success of therapy?
Okay. Um, the client
Yeah.
and the therapist. The client in terms of levels of motivation, their ability to engage with the therapy, and use therapy in a way that's constructive and forward moving. The therapist in terms of their ability to form a relationship successfully with the client, to instill a degree of hope that the therapy will be successful. Their ability to foster something called the working alliance. The working alliance is probably the most important part of therapy in terms of the factors that contribute towards good therapy outcomes. And it's made up of three things: the goals that therapist and client construct for where the therapy needs to go, the means or methods, as they're known. So how will we get to where you want to go in the most effective and efficient way? How will we work together to ensure that you end up getting your needs met? And the third element of the working alliance is the bond. How we feel about each other, whether we like each other, whether we respect each other, whether there's enough of a kind of warmth and mutual respect that actually it oils the wheels of the therapy process.
I think if you'd have asked me before this conversation, I would have said that I've had 5 therapists and I only really like one.
Okay.
But hearing what you've just said there would make me think that actually it is that bond. Because I tried different forms of therapy, different types. It was, give him a shout out, Keith, my therapist. Well, the therapist I work with, I don't like saying my therapist, it sounds a bit possessive, doesn't it? Keith, the therapist I work with, amazing, completely changed my life forever. But I felt in that first session, I felt like he got it. And he does get it. And I didn't get that from any of the other 4 therapists that I saw. And I was disinterested in the outcomes of this, definitely worse.
It is absolutely critical that there is that bond there. I always say to potential clients, shop around. It's like you need to treat looking for a therapist like buying a pair of shoes. It's how often do you walk into a shoe shop and just take a pair of shoes off the shelf and say, "I'll have these." It's like you try them on, you see how they
Yeah.
fit. You walk around a bit and see whether they're going to pinch or not. Therapy and choosing a therapist should be no different.
As a therapist, would that upset you if someone kind of had a session and didn't like it and moved on?
No, not at all. I would rather they have a session and move on because they felt like I wasn't the right therapist for them. So I will always say at the end of an initial assessment session with clients, I'd say at the beginning, the purpose of this is for me to learn more about you, what's brought you here, what it is that you're looking for, how much I can be of help, and then for you to ask me what you need to know about me, to give you the confidence that we might be able to work together. And then it's for you to make a decision. And you do not have to do that now. Go away, take time, talk to other people, and come back to me when you're ready and let me know. And if you choose another therapist, that's absolutely fine. Because that client will have chosen another therapist for the right reasons for them.
I think is really powerful to know. And I wish I knew that all those years ago.
Yeah.
That it was a case of finding the things that are going to make it work is me liking the therapist, me believing, understanding the process, believing it's going to work and doing the work.
Yeah.
And seeing the therapist regularly. And for the therapist as well, it's in their interest to have a client that would align with them and that brings that attitude and that.
Absolutely. And I would also say, in response to your question about feeling like you were wasting the therapist's time, if you ever get the sense from a therapist that you are wasting their time in that initial conversation, move on.
That has really helped. Honestly, it's helped clear a lot of things up. How can people go about getting access to therapy?
A variety of routes. The NHS, with or without the intervention of GP, who may need to refer. So people can often self-refer into services like IAPT. So NHS, voluntary sector, voluntary third sector, charitable sector, call it what you will. Often here the services are kind of very patchily spread. So inner London, for example, will be probably much better resourced than many rural communities. So it may be much harder to access services there. But the sort of charitable stroke third sector may well have provision available. Most likely to be either low cost or free. It may be possible that people have access to counselling services through their employer. I was working with an organisation called the Employee Assistance Professionals Association, the EAPA, doing some comparative studies between EAP and NHS counselling. And the EAPA's analysis suggested that up to 47% of employees in the UK have access to counselling, short-term counselling, through their employer, which I was amazed by. I mean, I think it's a really encouraging figure. It would be great if it were higher, but up to half of the population potentially would have access.
So let's unpack those, because I suppose there'd be private therapy as well.
Private therapy as well,
later.
yeah.
I suppose the first three you mentioned there would be therapy that doesn't actually have a cost. So
Correct.
The first one, the cost direct to you as a client.
Although often the third sector services, they often make an assessment of means and may ask for a contribution.
Okay, that's good.
But broadly speaking, the principle is correct.
So the NHS, my experience was I went through my GP originally, but I didn't necessarily have to. You can often self-refer, depending on your area. In my area, you don't even need to go and see a GP. You can self-refer straight to them.
Yeah.
So there's one place to get what will be free therapy in the UK. You mentioned the third sector. I've never actually received therapy through a third sector organisation, but I am aware there's a really, and I'll put a link to this as well, there's a really good website called the Hub of Hope that
Okay.
I like a lot, where you put your postcode in and it will tell you what therapy is available in your area.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Charitable services, therapy, should actually have the local NHS provision as well. So Hub of Hope might be the one-stop
That's
shop.
a really good resource. Yeah.
Very good. And the other one is, you mentioned work support. So there's employee assistance programs. And my experience with employee assistance programs, and from what I've heard, is that a lot of people have access to it but don't use it because they're often scared. Now,
Yeah.
I'm guessing it varies depending on employer, but my experience is that employer assistance programs offer things that aren't just counselling as well. They offer some financial and legal advice, I think. I guess there must be varying packages, but it'd be worth finding out as well if your employer has some sort of employee assistance program.
Oh, I mean, absolutely, absolutely. Generally, those services will be short term, between 6 and 8 sessions, for example, which doesn't sound a lot, but with the right therapist, you can do an awful lot of useful work in 6 to 8 sessions. There are some NHS employers, they are fairly few and far between now, that offer what are called in-house services. So they engage, they actually engage the therapists themselves. Sometimes public sector organisations like NHS employers, emergency services still retain an in-house service, and they are often absolutely fantastic services, really, really high quality, because they're embedded in the organisation. Other organisations will tend to contract those services out to employee assistance programs. And those can be accessed independently of the employer. So there should be somewhere on either available from HR or on the company website details of how you can access that provision, hopefully independently of HR.
I've had work support from 2 different sources.
Okay.
The EA, so employee assistance program, employers call it EAP because it's easier. EAP support, it's often in like your welcome pack. I found when I've joined organisations, is a really common thing to have. As you say, was it 47% of people have access to it, which is huge. I found that if you go in at your welcome emails, there's often resources online. So you will have to, it depends on your company, but have a little look to see if you've got one. And when I've spoken to them, you call an external organisation and it's all anonymous. So you don't have to necessarily, if you're concerned about telling your employer, your boss, you can then go directly to an EAP. I also had health insurance through one of my employers.
Okay.
They gave us private health, and I got access to see a counsellor for 8 sessions on that as well. So if you do have these benefits at work, so we discussed NHS as a route to go down.
Yep.
We've discussed, and we'll try and find it that in the Hub of Hope, I think, has NHS, but third sector and charities. And we've spoken about work. So there is access to therapy out there.
There is.
So let's just say I have a limited amount of sessions, and this could be because I've got it through the NHS and I may have 6 or 12 sessions, or employee assistance program, I've only got 6 sessions, or charity.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do in advance to make sure I get the most from those therapy sessions?
Okay, I would suggest 2 things. One is think like a consumer. Remember that you are a consumer of these services and not a recipient of a charity. You are a customer, you are a consumer, so think like one and think like you are entitled to the best possible service that you could ever get. And I think if you can adopt that kind of mindset, it may help it may help you, if all else fails, to challenge what you're getting if you don't feel like it's working for you. So I would say that. The other thing that I would say is be as clear as you can about what it is that you would like to get from therapy, especially if it is short term. It should be the job of a therapist to help you to clarify early on in the process of therapy what it is that you have come for, what it is that you want to go away with, what it is that you want to have achieved by your final session. Some therapists are better at doing that than others. But if you can be as clear as you can right from the get-go, then it will help you to ensure that you've done your bit about getting therapy off to a good start.
If you're going to see a therapist, you've got limited sessions.
Yeah.
Think like a consumer. Maybe don't waste. If you don't like the therapist, you don't think it's working, don't
Use
waste
your voice.
Session. Yeah, speak out, and try and figure out what it is that you want to work on. So if they sit there, is that a pretty common first question? Like, what would you like to achieve? Or early question?
I don't inhabit other therapists' therapy spaces, so I really don't know. It should be the starting point for any engagement with therapy, but I cannot guarantee that it is.
So rather than sitting in that chair like I did, being like, well, I don't know what I want. Yeah, almost like looking for a cure, like you tell me.
But a good therapist will help you to clarify that. It's like, okay, so how do you feel? And so one of the things that you might feel is you don't necessarily know what's possible. You don't know what you could achieve if things went well, but you know how you feel, and you might know that you want to stop feeling like this. So that is a really good start. And from there, we can work out, well, would it be helpful to try and understand what it is that has contributed towards you feeling as you are at the moment? If that will be helpful, then we can spend some time focusing on that. If you want something different, then we can maybe clarify what it is that would be the most useful first point that we would begin to engage on. So it may not be absolutely clear right at the start what the end is going to look like, or the end point, or the goal is, but it should always be the case that the therapist is helping you as the client to gain a level of clarity about what you would like to see change, and what is possible.
I think that would have helped me a lot
Yeah.
all those years ago to get the most out of the sessions, especially even just me being prepared to be more honest than I was, and more acknowledging I've got limited sessions. This is how I feel. I want to explore this. That's really useful.
Yeah. And it's okay not to necessarily know definitively what it is that you want.
Yeah.
It's okay to be confused about what's possible, especially if it's your first time in therapy, or you've not had a good experience of therapy before, which is all too common. But it should be the job of the therapist to help you be as clear as you can be at that particular point.
So let's just say we follow this podcast through. We've you've got your free sessions. You've got a good therapist, but they've come to an end. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the final option we haven't discussed yet is private therapy.
Yep.
When most people think of private therapy, they often think it's expensive. I think that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
Why do the fees seem so high?
Okay. So I have two thoughts on that. Well, I have three thoughts. One is, I wonder if that is what people think, that fees are too high. I don't know. I've never seen any research into it, but it will be interesting to find out. Past that, I would say expensive relative to what? What you would pay for somebody to come and clean your windows, in which case it would be expensive. Or relative to consulting with a matrimonial lawyer in the course of going through a divorce, in which case it would probably be incredibly cheap. So I think expensive is relative.
Yeah, that's a really fair point.
And bear in mind that therapists go through a professional training, which is normally somewhere between 3 and 5 years. It's fun. We fund the training ourselves. It's not like doctors and nurses whose training is funded by the state. We pay for this ourselves. We pay for our supervision, which we are required to have on a regular basis ourselves, professional indemnity insurance, room hire, premises, upkeep, professional infrastructure. All of those are costs to somebody who is self-employed, and anybody who is self-employed will kind of understand that, and understand, what's involved in setting up a sole trader or as a business, a self-employed business person. So there are all those costs, and they need to be met, and over and above which we want to turn an income. We want to turn in a reasonable income, and I think that the majority of therapists' charges are not unreasonable when you look at it like that. There is I don't know whether I should throw this in or not, but I'll throw it in. BMW in their advertising many years ago had a kind of catchphrase which accompanied their adverts, which said reassuringly expensive. Now, I mention that because I would suggest to anybody who's listening to this, don't go for the cheapest therapy option if you can afford something a bit more expensive, because cheap does not cheap might be cheap because it's not that good, or you've got a therapist who doesn't feel confident in charging very much because they haven't got much confidence in their ability or outcomes. Doesn't mean to say that an expensive therapist is necessarily any better. I mean, I always judge therapists on their outcomes. So I would say when you kind of look at it in the round, in the context that I've just described, I would hope that therapy relatively is not that expensive, and it might be, you could turn it around and see it as an investment.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm also a tight northerner.
Okay,
I'm a tight northerner.
that's fine.
So I think what I found is when I saw the fees,
Yeah.
upward, they are, again, it depends what you can compare it to, but when I saw the fees, I kind of had this image that like therapists were just sat there working, 8-hour days, charging that hourly rate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing that's not the case, that you don't have like 8 clients a day, and there's, I'm guessing there's probably other, that fee you pay for one session. I'm guessing that there's prep time,
Yep.
note time afterwards.
Yep. There is indeed. I mean, from my experience, I can tell you that for every client hour that I do, and I probably I probably see no more than about 12 or 15 clients, absolutely max in a week. There will be, for every client hour, there will be at least an additional half hour that goes into preparation, note taking, reflection, administration, just for that particular client. There is a lot of work that goes on, which is about processing the material that comes up in that session, because it enables me to be a more effective therapist if I give that client the time outside of the session as well as inside of the session. So for me, that constitutes me working for that client.
I see, exactly as you say, as an investment, and I'll pick up on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, right.
Can I just say
Yeah.
that, I do recognise that it is outside the scope of many people to
Yeah.
be able to afford that kind of expenditure. And that I'm sad about that. I would love to live in a world where therapy was more readily available, where therapists could be properly resourced, salaried by the state to provide the kind of therapy that I and other therapy colleagues provide. Sadly, that's not the world that we live in.
I did a budget. I looked at my spend, over the last 3 months, and I thought, right, how can I make this work? And I realised that and I don't know if I should admit this in a podcast, but my alcohol spend in London was a therapy session a week.
Right.
So I stopped drinking for quite a long period of time. I just stopped drinking to cover the cost of my therapy. I told my mates what I was doing with no problem. And that's one of my points that I find personally. I would say that therapy is the best investment I've ever made. The experiences I've had, I wouldn't have had I have not gone to therapy. I look at the best things in my life, the things that have given me the most joy, things that have literally come on the back of me making difficult decisions that I made on the back of therapy and me having no regrets. And yeah, I think it's amazing. I really do. So that would be my advice. If you do look at it and you think that seems quite expensive, you're giving a good breakdown from a therapist's perspective as to why that might be expensive, and look at your own circumstances. And again, it does break my heart that there are going to be a lot of people out there that listen to this and think, I want to see a private therapist and I just can't afford it. Yeah, and that is savage. And hopefully there are some of the free sessions, the NHS, the third sector that can pick up and help that. But if you do look at your budget and think, well, actually, do you know what? Last month I spent £100 on clothes and I was out boozing all the time. If I spent less money on clothes and boozing, maybe I could afford a therapist. That's what I came to. That's my 10p's worth anyway.
No, that's great. That's great. I applaud you for the choices that you made, and it sounds like you would make the same choice again, and it's made a real difference to your life, and that at the end of the day is what's really important.
Thank you. Nice to say. So let's just say for the process, what's my budget? Like, yeah, I want to get a private therapist. Where can you go to find one?
Go to a therapist, register from a professional body like BACP, the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, the BPS, British Psychological Society, or the UKCP, the UK Council for Psychotherapy. One of those registers is where I would start. Be prepared to do some legwork, and again, think like a consumer. Begin to get a sense of what these people are saying to you through their profiles. Go and visit their web pages. Do not rush the process. Select the people whose profiles and prices speak to you most, and get on the phone and say, I'd like to talk to you about the possibility of therapy. I am shopping at the moment. See if they will give you a free assessment session. Many will, some don't. And talk to 3 or 4, maybe more, and you will begin to get a sense of this person will work, this person won't work for me, this person won't work for me, this person will, and that it's at that point you can make a decision. Be prepared to put in the legwork to get with the right therapist.
I know that would really help.
And I will also say, for people who are going through that process and want some insider advice, I've written a guide called, if I remember it right, The 5 Things You Need to Know About Finding a Therapist.
Brilliant.
It's on my website on the front page, and I'm assuming that you can insert a link to the website. So people just need to put in their email address, and then they can download that guide.
We'll put a link to all the organisations that registered you mentioned. So if you're looking for a therapist, it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
We'll put a link to your website so people can get access to that resource. So that's the best place for people to find you.
I think, yeah, that's the best place to find.
Brilliant. I'll put a link so people got it.
Great.
I think it's my last question. How long does therapy usually take?
Depends what you want to get out of it.
Oh, I was expecting how long's a piece of string, but yeah.
If you are looking to address an issue like anxiety or maybe not depression, that can, I think, take a little longer, but common mental health difficulties and struggles that are not really deeply, deeply embedded, I think you could expect to see some decent improvement in your problems and symptoms, whatever those might be, in around 8 to 15 sessions. And if that's not happening, then you need to be addressing that with your therapist, because that is what research tells us is a typical trajectory for counselling, is that you will see an improvement within that kind of time frame. Some people go into therapy, as a real kind of deep exploration of what is it, who am I, what is it that makes me tick, a much deeper level exploration of their own kind of personal, intrapersonal dynamics and psyche and so on. But if you're just coming to do a job of, I want to be suffering less with these particular issues, and those are mostly amenable to a short-term piece of work.
Thank you, Barry. I honestly appreciate this so much. I put myself in my shoes that I've done the whole way through this podcast. This is stuff I really wish I'd known before I started my journey. I think it would have helped me get the most from my sessions. It would have got rid of a lot of suffering and confusion. So I really hope that this podcast makes it out there and that people can find that therapy journey even easier. Is it all right? We'll put your website on there, your email address is on there, so if people have any questions, they can just get in touch.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to hear from anybody who wants to get in touch. As you just saying, in terms of the things I wish I'd known, it's like I'm reminded of the phrase, wisdom is the thing that arrives just shortly after the time when we really, really need it.
There we go. What better way to end than that? Thank you, Barry.
Well, you've stayed until the end, so you're basically part of our community now, and I need your help. I've paid for the whole of season 1 myself, and right now I'm running on fumes. I'm trying to raise 1,200 quid to cover the cost of season 2. Every penny will go towards creating episodes that help people who are feeling lost and alone. If you found this podcast helpful and you're able to, please do chip in and help us to help others. You can donate towards season 2 by heading to my Ko-fi page, which you'll find in the show notes below. And if you're in London and you want to join our Reconnect waiting list, go to reconnect.club, or if you'd like me to speak at your organisation, it's joetudor.com. Thank you for your help in growing the Reconnect community. Until next time, see ya.